It's really good that you saw that, really, with the invitations, because they're the source of all suffering, really, because we're taking delivery of them as though those thoughts and beliefs and emotions are our own, when they never have been. It's just been like a delivery system to try to get us to subscribe to them and energize them and have the full-on experience. But it's so liberating to realize, well, it's really just like it's like an energy game.
Yeah. I mean, they did such a great job. I was completely taken in. And then hearing, your explanation was, yeah, then that was the beginning of a sort of
Kind of unraveling.
Sorry?
An unraveling, maybe.
An unraveling and a recognizing of what was between all that, what was actually behind all that.
Yes. Well, the content.
The content. Yeah. So, yeah.
So how do you feel you are in terms of realization?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I sometimes I think that there's an issue with still believing in this personal self. But only yesterday I was revisiting. I heard your interview with Simon. It was difficult because I think he's French. It's quite a difficult recording. But anyway, I heard that. And you were talking about entertainment, how these things can actually become very entertaining. I thought, yeah, what's happened? So I kind of just got, now what's happened is there's just this entertainment going on. I'm just loving kind of hearing all these conversations and like, but I thought, okay, well, let's just not listen to the next one, and let's just allow some quiet and see what happens. And I was drawn back to Liberation Unleashed, which I came across back in 2014.
Oh, wow.
And so it was like, okay, we'll look through this. For some reason this has come up. Let's have a look. And in the back of that book, there's 7 steps or something. And one of them was, okay, just look and just see. Notice that seeing is happening, and I'm doing that. Very much like your effortless awareness thing. And for some reason, while I was doing that, it was like, oh, seeing is happening, and nobody's seeing.
Yes.
There's just a split second. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that be amazing if talking to David, that could become a little bit more knowable, a bit more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, thank you. So
it is utterly simple, and the way you describe it is very genuine, because realization is so subtle. It's really only seeing that there's been a case of mistaken identity, that we thought or took ourselves to be a separate being, when all along we've remained as this open space within which all forms appear. And we don't move into that. It's just we always have been that. It's just that the whole of the dualistic system is designed to make it seem as though we are a person in time and space.
Yes, I loved your explanation of the koshas when you were talking to what's his name? I don't know whether to call him Hale Doskin or Dale Hoskin. I always get it muddled up.
Yes.
Anyway,
Hale, yes.
Hale. So you were talking to Hale, and he was talking about Lester Levinson, and because I thought about these koshas as sort of levels like that before, that and then when you guys were talking, there was this oh, okay. It talked about how Lester Levinson had kind of gone more circles, circles within circles within circles, down to the physical in the middle, the body in the middle. And something that you said was so helpful about moving in and out of conscious awareness, moving out and in through these.
Yes.
So, because part of the issue that arose here was that belief, oh God, I've lost it, oh, it's gone, and like life was becoming more and more difficult, and but I had it and it's gone.
Yes.
And it's so interesting because that yeah, the understanding of the invitations and the moving in and out of those,
Yes.
where the attention is
Yes.
resting, and what becomes real, and this emergence of this person. And as soon as there's this, oh, this me that blooming decides it's, you know, it's in charge, it's kind of central, and wow, yeah. So yeah, so that
Really
was
good.
really, really good.
Well, actually, that's the key in a way, because with each of us, there can be realization in a very simple way, as it was for you. But unless it's revealed that the invitations continue to try to keep us in the personal mode, or they try to invite us back, then it seems as though we've lost it. But it isn't that we've lost it, it's always there. It's just that there are these invitations which are trying to draw us back energetically to invest in the personal mode again. But when you realize it is only an invitation, you realize you've remained in your true infinite nature all along. It's just that there are these invitations trying to get us to believe in individuality again. And we can either accept them or decline them. But if we accept them, then it does feel energetically depleting, because it's only ever our own energy which is fueling it.
So exhausting.
It is.
Such an
Yes.
exhausting
Yes.
time. The last, what do we want to call it, 4.5 years, 5 years since starting to believe that, you know, I've lost it, everything's going wrong. You know, there was a me that had plans to go and to be in Spain, and that was like thwarted, and it's like this whole story just started. And yeah, the me believe, there was the mind believed it. The mind believed it.
Yes.
And started to create this whole thing.
Yes. I like the way you describe it as the mind rather than my mind, because it maintains that sense of detachment, doesn't it? Whereas you can see when we use words like my mind, how we're kind of consenting to the idea that the content is ours, when really it isn't. It's just being beamed in.
Yeah. And same with the body. It's like the body starts to be, oh, this is my body. That seems more difficult at times, because it just seems so much more natural to identify with the body. There is this identification with the body.
Yes.
I think maybe partly because it's been unwell since it was very young, but about age 1.5 or so, with this respiratory condition. There's been probably quite a lot. There's been probably perhaps a certain level of sensation that's made it, that's drawn the attention to it more. Perhaps, I don't know. But yeah, so that's, but again, and again, doing mindfulness back in 2011, I think. The mindfulness, I remember the point at which the body, the sensations in the body, and the kind of being ill like being tired, being ill.
Mm.
And I remember the first time that the mind didn't go there with it.
Ah.
And it just went, well, okay, this is fine.
Yes.
It's okay. The body needs some rest. There's this thing that needs resting. It's okay.
Yes.
It doesn't need to get, there doesn't need to be like, it doesn't need to be fed up. That nobody needs to be fed up about it.
No.
Yeah, because that used to be very automatic. Like, oh, I don't want to be ill. I want to be doing all the things that Melissa likes doing, and I don't want to be this ill person. And that just
it's great the way you describe it, because it makes you realize that personalization is an option, because everything is designed to make it seem as though the dualistic realm is very desirable. But actually, the simplicity of just noticing the forms appearing. So maybe there could be, you could say there's impersonal awareness of a little discomfort in the body. But as long as it's seen in that context, rather than believing ourselves to be the body, which is the way the dualistic realm works, it likes to pretend that the physical body is primary, and then everything is as a result of that. When really the physical body is at the end of the line, really, because firstly there's attributeless being, and then it goes through the sequence of the koshas to the final one, which is the physical. But it's great you saw that, actually, because it's the simplicity of seeing that the body really is at the end of the line rather than being primary, and then we can change the context, because it isn't really necessary to be too concerned about the body. I didn't really give it too much attention. Obviously you keep it clean and as healthy as possible, but there isn't a big investment or identification with the physical body, because it's changing. And so
I thought it was so interesting with COVID and this absolute obsession with the body and illness, pre-existing conditions, and it's like, wow, the story of the body got so strong. And for the re-emerging, for the not re-emerging, but for the this belief in Melissa, which had already started to get stronger again, on becoming a grandmother. There's, there would be, a 2-year-old has, is a very energetic little something. And then there are these thoughts, all these thoughts. Oh, I wish I had more energy. Oh, I wish I could just carry her up these stairs, or whatever. And all this started. So actually, it was identifying. It was the role of grandmother, the identification with being a grandmother, identification with getting older, then, and the COVID, and like it's so clear now how it all kind of just bundled up into this thing.
Well, that's a good description, because it's the way you describe it. You were kind of observing it from impersonal being, and then you saw that the personal realm was something which you could invest in different ways, like in the different roles and the different aspects, and then the energy, it can be quite exhausting to do that, but then you realize you can maintain a fairly simple approach which doesn't require such heavy investment. And I think that's the key, really, because the dualistic realm is optional, so we can regulate the degree of investment in the personal realm. And the way you've noticed, for instance, comparison is one aspect. So comparing the way things are now to the way they were a few years ago, perhaps when we were more energetic, or the conditions were different. But it is as it is now, and it's just really simple to adjust to that, and not compare it, and just see what delightful things are available now, really.
Just to love it. Yeah, but you know, when the mind was creating it, and there was this sense of being in it,
Mm.
there wasn't the space to
No.
see it as the whole. It was just
Yes.
only as it's thinning out again,
Yes.
or as the that movement away from that central
Yes.
point of in the koshas.
Yes.
Um, yeah. That's where that's where it's being sort of seen from now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Um,
can you just kind of turn the personal mode off? Because if we take this moment,
mm,
we can just see that there is effortless being. So when there's no engagement of the mind or the emotions, there is just being, which is effortless. And it's right here in this present moment. And then when we're not using, well, when thoughts aren't arising or words, including words like I'm, me, or mine, then it's simply impersonal being. So there's impersonal being, impersonal awareness, and it's just the open space in which things effortlessly appear.
mm,
And we can remain there largely, and then only engage either the mind or the emotions or the physical body when we wish to. And so, for instance, if you're visiting your children or your granddaughter, then there's a kind of stepping into the role, and that's a conscious thing, which isn't really um, an impediment at all. It's really just that's just a role which can also be um, it can be experienced most effectively when impersonal being is predominating as well, because the it's the overinvestment in the personal realm which causes the problems. When we're just investing lightly and we're just having the experiences in quite a light way, um,
yeah.
then
It's
it's
the over investment, as you say. The
yes.
over investment. It was like it was total. It became total investment.
Mm,
Total investment.
mm,
And now this is okay. So it's a remembering and recognizing. It's interesting when you first started asking that question about, well, can you rest in the
mm.
rest as awareness?
That's great. You see that too.
Well, what happened was, okay, there was this noticing of this quite a strong emotion of kind of excitability, like, oh, this is so great. So it's like, actually, there was still a sense of the personal, this person feeling this excitability.
Mm,
It was it was there gradually as you were speaking. It was softening,
mm.
and then of course it wants to jump in again, so it wants to come in and say something. So here it is speaking again.
Well, sometimes though it can be that when when impersonal being is predominating, we're not really activating the personal mode, then we can move in the other direction, which is more towards bliss. And
Mm,
that can give rise to an invitation, because if there's the simple seeing that you're just resting as impersonal being, which is effortless, there can be the arising of euphoria, and that, the feeling the way you describe it, which is actually because you're moving towards the body of bliss, which is a great thing. And the mind, though, doesn't really want you to go in that direction. The mind wants to draw you back into the conceptual realm, so it can deliver thoughts, because it's ingenious the way it works. It's so quick in the way it picks up on what's going on, and then it wants to draw you back into the idea that, oh, well, if you entertain that, actually that's putting you more into personalization. Well, it could
ah,
well be that it's actually directing you more towards infinite bliss, but the mind doesn't want you to discover that. So it's saying, actually, it's taking you to personalization, because the invitations always work on the basis of inversion. So it's if there are invitations arising, it's worth looking at them and just kind of assessing them to see what they're trying to persuade you to believe, because they're always trying to persuade you to believe the opposite of what the potential is.
wow, yeah, yeah. It's that noticing. it's that having that sufficient presence to notice it, notice the invitation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you'll find, well, actually, it's the way you describe things, there is already wonderful clarity in terms of the knowing of your true infinite impersonal nature, because even when you said resting as awareness rather than resting in awareness, that indicates that the personal mode has already been surrendered, really, because resting as awareness, you're resting as the infinite field of awareness. So could you just give me a few examples of forms arising effortlessly in this moment? So just any forms that are present. So you're not Melissa, you're the infinite ocean of impersonal, indestructible awareness. And there are forms arising within that. So there's the sound of the two voices. And well, from here, there's awareness of the beautiful flowers and the interior of the room. And so it's just whatever forms arise equally and effortlessly. So it could be thoughts or emotions or sensations or perceptions. But just if you could just mention a few arising effortlessly.
So there's the image of the screen is the most obvious, and there's this face in the middle of the screen. A jug behind supporting everything, but those are but it's basically those are all colours and shapes. I mean, it's colours and shapes.
Yes.
Yeah, and what else is here? Sense of body sitting, this sense of body on the chair. There's the sound of the fridge. I think there's the sound of a pigeon outside cooing. And there's a little something going on in the chest. There's a sense of aliveness in the body, right the way through the body. There's a slightly spacey feeling. Pulsing in the back of the head. I mean, yeah, there's a lot.
Yes, fantastic. That's really good. The simplicity in the way you describe it, though, it's the simplest form of awareness, which is just noticing forms arising effortlessly. And so there's no judgment or commentary about them. It's just the simple noticing. And the only place we can do that from really is from effortless being or from the body of wisdom. And it's actually seeing that that is what you are primarily. And then there's the secondary mode, which you can activate if you wish to, which is the personalized mode, where you're experiencing as a human being. And so you can engage the mind and comment on things or compare them or judge them, and knowing that that's another option, but that's a different mode of experience. And the one is effortless, the effortless noticing the forms arising, and then the personal mode requires more effort. But it's in that simple distinction that there is realization, because it's seeing that your impersonal nature has always been there. It can't come and go. And whenever you just stop activating the personal mode, then there is impersonal awareness, impersonal being. And and then when you see that, you realize the degree to which you invest in the personal mode is optional. And even you know, meeting with people, for instance, if you go to visit, you know, your children, mainly you can rest as impersonal being, and you can experience the forms, so the forms of the children or your granddaughter or the objects in the room or the forms arising, they're all arising within this infinite field of awareness you've always been. So that's actually unity consciousness rather than the dualistic realm, because you're seeing everything arising within oneself. And that changes the nature of the experience hugely, really.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's something which hasn't. I don't feel I've experienced that, apart from one morning a long time ago, on waking, the there was a awakeness, and into the awakeness came a world and a body, a room and a body, but there was waking from sleep and nothing else until they just gently arose. Generally speaking, it's there's not a sense of it all arising within that which I am. That's not the experience. It's like, well, it's all here, and this body's here, and this mind's here, and it's all here.
Can you see the forms which we normally personalize? So, for instance, thoughts or emotions or even the body mind as being forms arising within this open space of awareness along with all else. So, you know, you could say there's awareness of the body mind sitting on the seat, and then there's awareness of the pigeon cooing, or there's awareness of the plants in the room, or of the furniture, or of the light.
Yes.
And they're all actually arising equally and effortlessly. So the body mind isn't known any more than the flowers or the light. They're all known equally, actually.
Yeah.
And it's a single field of awareness which is already fully here. And it's only that infinite field of awareness which is knowing everything, including the body mind or the thoughts or the emotions. It's just that we've been conditioned to personalize those, when really, from your infinite nature, they're all known equally.
Yeah, it's all fully here, that's it.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's already fully here and fully known.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
But it's quite interesting to begin to do that consciously. So if you're, you know, because normally if we meet people, especially people who are familiar, so with your children, you know, you drive along and they say, oh, here's mum. And, you know, you sort of, you play that role and you speak to them as though you are their mum, obviously. But the experience can be quite different, because you can just rest as this open space of awareness within which the forms are appearing. So there's the awareness of the body mind of Melissa, and then there's awareness of the physical bodies of the children, or the your granddaughter, and of the objects in the room. And that changes the nature of the relationships in a way, because in some way people do pick up on that. They sense that you're experiencing as a field of awareness rather than engaging with them in the dualistic mode, in the subject-object mode.
There's this conditioning and this expectation. Mind, this. Oh well, there's this. Oh well, we're here, so there needs to be sort of chit chat, and how are you,
Yes.
and how's this been, how's that been,
Yes.
and while that's going on,
that's the personal mode, isn't it? It's just like a little. It's like it's like the opening script of a play, you could say.
Yes, and that there's that is a is it's a difficult thing, Melissa, I love my children.
Yes, of course.
And yet that kind of exchange is quite hard to do.
You find that, yeah. It feels quite
Yeah,
artificial in a way, doesn't it? And quite,
it feels effortful.
yes.
Whereas when I'm holding the baby, because my son has a new baby, 5 weeks old.
Mm.
When I'm holding the baby and just looking at the baby, it's great because the baby's not saying anything. Nothing happens.
Effortless baby and effortless being.
Oh, so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even the things that are said when it's quite a deep and meaningful conversation, it's like, yeah, but this is the things that are being said are being said based on an understanding that is not shared. It's not
Yes.
shared. So
yeah, the direct knowing and the direct the full awareness of the baby, and just while it isn't even a connection because it's unity, but you can't put words to that, can you? And when you try to, it just always falls short, because you say, oh, what a beautiful baby, or isn't your baby quiet, or isn't your baby alert or present? And we use those words, but they're always secondary, so they don't go anywhere near the direct knowing of what the experience is.
yeah.
You're really
Well,
clear,
luckily,
Melissa.
I get to sit with the baby. I get to sit with they're glad of the sort of little bit of respite.
Yes.
So they'll go and have a nap or something.
Yes.
So I don't really have to say anything. I'm just
fantastic.
It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And nothing, no thoughts, just this this being being going on.
And do you sense the baby is in effortless being, that there is, you can kind of sense that there aren't really any thoughts? There can sometimes be a little impulse, if they're tired or if they're thirsty or hungry or something. But generally, you just sense the presence really with children.
Yeah, totally. And this actually going back to the story, that when the news came that my daughter was pregnant with my granddaughter, there wasn't this kind of like, oh, and I knew that was what they wanted. That was, planned and wanted and everything. But instead of there being this kind of, oh, that's great, there was this like, oh, wow, that there's going to be this whole being a human thing going on, that gonna have to happen and then be seen through. And it was like, oh gosh, that was like the first you know, and then there were thoughts like, well, what's the matter with you? You know, you're supposed to be great, happy, and you know, this is great. So all that came.
You couldn't
Oh
say any of that though, really, could you?
no, it's well, no, not really, no, not like that. No. It's, yeah. And so that's what's so interesting, seeing my little granddaughter starting out as
Mm, mm,
just that,
mm,
that, and then gradually the conditioning,
mm,
the mind coming into
mm,
formation, the expectations, the behaviors, everything, and
mm.
wow, it's. And I don't know whether this is just a story, but there's a sort of slight sense, there's a bit of a sense of heartbreak over that happening.
Mm.
Um,
To see them
um,
going into the personal realm.
yeah,
Mm,
um, yeah, and of course, but of course, that's what happens. That's the, you know,
well, it's quite interesting because you can have much influence really because there are certain kinds of activity which keep them in alignment with their infinite nature. So things like creativity, for instance,
yeah,
and appreciation of things, and also um, if the conversation is more to do with humor and lightness,
yeah,
then it's a different experience. Whereas if it all becomes very conceptual, then it's putting them into the realm of limitation. But lots of things, to do with the enjoyment of the world, and whether it's art or music or um, just anything which opens the door to creativity, so that that remains open, because the limitation takes place in the mind, and it's the conceptualizing process which creates that sort of mundane experience. Whereas without that, where there is creativity and lightness and joy,
yeah.
it remains more magical, and you can have quite an influence on children in that way.
Okay, because we just have a great time together. Because
Fantastic.
there isn't that kind of
Yes.
going on. You know,
And so that's it's all you already know intuitively how to
yeah,
just keep it impersonal, really.
yeah. It's so beautiful. It's just like the possibilities just are bubble up, and then
Mm,
they, you know,
mm,
they happen.
mm,
Yeah, it's only problematic when there's a fixed time where you have to hand over at this time, and then
mm,
there's this, oh well, we've got to be on time, and then it's like I then think, well, oh well, we've got to be on time. So then there's this palpable pressure in the
mm,
body to
mm.
meet
But
that
deadline.
expectation,
Yes.
yes, whilst at the same time knowing that if that pressure is felt by this little grandchild,
Mm.
that everything collapses into difficulty.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Yeah, because they're so open and perceptive.
Yeah. Whereas if it's just like, oh well, let's
Yes.
let's do it. Go. Shall we go down? Shall we go?
Mm,
Shall we? There's shall we? And then it's always, well, yes.
mm,
When it's shall we, it's yes.
mm.
Yeah,
It's non-resistance, really, isn't it? Just having that sense of openness.
yeah, yeah. So it's amazing.
Mm.
Amazing. Yeah.
It's already there for you, Melissa, just the way you're conducting everything. There's such clarity in the way you're experiencing life, and just seeing um, that sense of openness from moment to moment, because you're kind of navigating the human experience increasingly from impersonal being rather than from the personal mode, which
Uh-huh.
is where the joy can remain. and also meeting other people there, you know, especially grandchildren, you can have a huge influence, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great being with her, and it's great being with other people who aren't, you know, deep in the belief in the
Their story and
story, the
mm,
difficulties and the drama, and
mm,
even if it's good, even if everything's going well, it's like that. There's a sort of belief in kind of it all going well and responsibility and doing things nicely and and it's sort of like yeah, it has
I
such
like
a
the way you see it as a comedy. It's great.
solid. Well, I'm seeing it as a comedy chatting to you, but when in it,
Mm,
yeah, it can feel like a challenge
mm,
in it. It's because the mind starts up and goes, oh dear, you know, none of this is true. The mind starts
mm,
saying, well, none of this is real, none of this is
mm,
true. And then the mind's going, and then Melissa appears, claiming those thoughts as,
mm,
you know, her
mm,
self. Then there's a self there.
mm,
And then it's like, oh, wow, here we go again.
mm.
So, yeah.
It can remain magical though, because, and I think children and animals are probably the best example because they don't get caught in those cul-de-sacs of limitation and conceptualization because they just move through between one experience of joy and another one, and
Yeah.
that's really the way they're directed. So it's just from the happiest experience currently to the next one, and
Yes.
and that tends to um, while you just see children when they're really young, there isn't any sense of self-image or anything. It's just really the directness of the experience and what's arising in that moment and the full enjoyment of it, and then no attachment, and then just moving on to the next thing.
Yes. Yes. It's beautiful.
Mm.
And yeah. And even as an adult, when that noticing that there's been this sort of hook, noticing being kind of hooked with that belief, that invitation, noticing that invitation coming,
Yes.
and it's like, oh, and if it's seen, there's this like little silent pop, and it's like, oof,
Yes.
come on,
Yeah.
and then go off, and then it's all off again, off again.
Mm.
It's so lovely.
Mm.
There's just that moment where it can,
Mm.
yeah, the declining can happen.
Mm.
Um,
It's quite interesting to see the distinction between the delivery from one's infinite nature, which is always a sense of expansion, and then the delivery coming from the dualistic realm, which is always a feeling of contraction. So it's very, without kind of having to research too much, the source of the invitations, just those simple feelings tell you the source. So if there's a feeling of expansion, you know that things are kind of opening up. And then if there's a feeling of contraction, you know it's trying to draw you in energetically to try to get you to invest in some experience which may not be particularly enjoyable.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
But the clarity has been there for you since, yeah, probably 2014. But um, the way it is with lots of people realize their true nature, but they don't understand the nature of the dualistic system and the way the invitations are being delivered, because there's realization, which is alignment with effortless being and realizing that's what you are. But immediately the dualistic realm wants to draw you back in, because when from effortless being, you've actually cancelled your investment in the dualistic realm. So the dualistic realm says, well, what can we do to draw you back in? So it usually looks for the most devastating concept to deliver, like, oh, I've lost it, or I'm not self-realized.
Yeah.
So people can realize their true nature and not understand that that's really all that's going on. And then they continue the searching. And actually the seeking perpetuates the dualistic realm, because seeking is within the energetic realm. And so people can be searching in the world. They could be searching, to succeed. I like the way you were saying it, even when things are going well, that sense. But when you see that they are only invitations to draw us back into the dualistic realm, and there's actually nothing we can do, because effortless being is already fully known, and it's so simple. So there isn't anything we need to do. We don't really need to process anything to do with the invitations, really. It's just knowing you are already infinite impersonal being, and there could be some invitations being delivered. But when you just decide beforehand that you're not going to take delivery of them, you don't need to process them, really, because they're just,
Yeah.
it's just like junk mail.
Yeah, it's so great. Yes, I like the junk mail and all that. I was thinking actually about the way you'd expressed that, and it was like, well, it's like those pizza things that come into the post box, like colourful leaflets saying,
Yes.
get these. Well, I mean, I don't want any pizza, but I don't kind of obsess about whether or not that's a good idea or a bad idea.
No.
It's like, well, I don't want any pizza. And it's just like, well, okay, it's already here. Just pop it in the bin. That's fine. Gone.
Yes.
No more thinking about the pizza, because it's just such a non-event, because it's
Yes.
not of any interest, and there's no judgment about it. I was thinking, but then the mind starts up. It's like, well, it's like, yeah, but there's no judgment about the pizza even being wrong or any problem with the pizza.
No.
It's just no, just not wanted, just not
Yes.
wanted.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, it's just amazing. But
Well, it's
the
fantastic.
what you said about the personalization of the invitations, that's all very well when it's a pizza. But it's when they come and they're going, and something is going, oh. I mean, that doesn't happen in real life, because I don't get leaflets where I go, wow, this is really interesting. But that's what sometimes comes into the mind. And it's so great to know about this now. So great. The whole thing starts up again, and sinking starts up again. There are times when it's all, back in the sort of 2011, 12, there wasn't any, and then it all started up again, and then it was quiet again, and then wow. But having this way that you've taught it right now at this time,
There's no going back.
It's just great. It's just great. It's as if the eyes are open now to notice when that's gonna, yeah, I see you. So yeah. So yeah, fantastic.
Do you feel there are any predominant invitations still? Are there any little hooks around your family members or anything like that where you can get drawn in?
Oh yeah, there's this this belief really about, oh yes, I need to help, I need to give, I need to, there's around being good and it's from some kind of idea about not being good enough, and so that has to sort of, it's like, oh, that needs to be sort of demonstrated. Goodness needs to be demonstrated. that was so big for a long time, for several years, being a grandmother.
Yes.
And then it was like, okay, well, actually, this isn't doing anybody any favors. Yeah, so it would be around, yeah. And there's something around, the joy comes up, and there's something about appropriateness. There's something about, behave properly. Something around that. But that's come about, that it's come about being back in this
with your family and back in the locality.
Yes.
It wasn't there in Spain.
No, not
No.
at all. No, it was just totally, completely different, experience. Yes.
It's good to see that and to know that it isn't an obstacle at all, really. It's just that's all that's arising, really. And it's the same.
It's not lost. It's not lost, because there was this story of like, oh God, well, I've lost it now. This is how things are.
Yes.
I've lost it.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yes.
Crazy. That going through the moving through the koshas.
Yes.
Now that I know that they're the koshas.
Yes.
It's like, well, that's okay. This is what's happening now. And then, there's such a sense of possibility. When I emailed you, it was like, oh my God, dark night of the soul. It's like, where do I go from here? It's like, this is all so heavy, so difficult, and then actually, I think the emailing in and of itself was that something, in a sense, it was like, I can't do this. And that was very helpful.
Good. That's a good example, though, really, the dark night of the soul, because it is the dark night of the soul, which I think you mentioned this in your email. It's just knowing that it is really the invitations which come as a kind of inversion, following clarity. So when there's clarity in the seeing of one's true nature, the dualistic realm doesn't want you to be able to remain there. So it tries to invite you back into drama and into low frequency experience. So people say, oh, I'm in the dark night of the soul, having had this experience. But all it is really, it's just that the dualistic realm doesn't want you to have the clarity of knowing that you can remain as the impersonal being. So it delivers these invitations quite forcefully to try to draw you back in. But when you know that's the game, it's just like having a big pizza delivered rather than a little one.
with extra
with extra topping, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
And it is never personal. That's the amazing thing. But we have to, the only way we can take delivery of it is if we're showing up in the personal realm, because nothing can be taken delivery of. It's like if you're just the open space of beingness, you can't open the door to the pizza delivery boy, because you're just this open space.
Yeah, no hand, no door, no delivery boy. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. The other, when you ask about these, whether there's anything there, the other thing that was there, and I don't know whether it still is, because there's such lightness here at the moment.
Fantastic.
It was the idea that if again, it's put the personalization. It's like, oh well, if I get if I'm free, if I'm light, and
Mm.
then what about those other, you know, what about the struggle? Should I be, will I still be able to give, to
Mm.
love?
Mm.
But now it's quite obvious talking with you that that's, even that question is just that concern is has no substance.
Mm.
Has no substance.
Mm.
It's another invitation.
Yes,
Yeah.
because
Mm.
really, those invitations into the idea of concern, or that there are people suffering and that kind of thing, they perpetuate the sort of virtual reality version. But when we the best thing we can contribute really is unity consciousness in the dualistic realm, because it erases all of those layers of suffering and preoccupation. So the best thing we can do is to not invest in them, really, because
Yes.
investing in them just perpetuates them.
Yes. 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 And all the creativity and that different frequency. You know, well, this is the mind again wanting to give a reason why that's a good idea. Because well, it's going back into helping mode. Oh yes, because that will help everybody. But that's again, that's an interesting story. Interesting story. Yeah. Yeah, it's okay to be okay.
Mm.
It's actually all right. You're allowed to be happy.
Yes.
It's this,
Yeah.
you're allowed. You're allowed to
Yes.
be.
Yes.
And if there's been something about not being allowed, then it can be very it can be taken very seriously.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
allowed to, yeah.
And it's the best thing we can do, well, in every respect, individually and collectively. So just that sense of, being, well, it's really things like self-respect, because so many aspects of the dualistic realm, because it's an energy game, they're designed to put us into feelings of guilt and, feeling that we're not deserving, and that, we should feel guilty, but just not entertaining those is the best solution, really.
Yeah, I mean, they're not good for anybody, right? It's just
No.
an absolute lose-lose situations.
Mm,
Awful.
mm, mm.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, the stories, the invitations, they come in,
Mm.
and there's such a sense of possibility.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And a possibility of sharing. I mean, I wrote this little story
Mm.
back in. Actually, it was when I was reading Gateless Gatecrashers and Liberation Unleashed back
Mm.
in 2014, and I had historically had this issue with my older sister,
Mm.
and it was like, what is going on? And I went on this holiday. It was like a sort of solo retreat, really, in
Mm.
many ways. And I was just reading that material, listening to that material,
Mm.
swimming in the pool, and then just eating looking at body, eating, walking, that kind of thing, and then just immersing myself in that material. And this story came straight through, and it's now been written, and it was beyond ideas of right and wrong, and it was Rumi's poetry, and it was this thing that I'd seen in the days of psychology, where there's this figure ground, and it's actually called Rubens' vase, and it's these two faces looking at each other.
Oh yes.
And then in the middle there's this vase, or I call it a candlestick.
Yes.
And I suddenly, so this what became apparent during that holiday was like this story came, the visual image came, and it was like, wow, that's what's going on between us two. Is this complete insistence. One is insisting on the candlestick, the other is insisting on the people, on the faces. And it's like, yeah, but
it's both.
It's always everything. It's always all of it. And it's like taking that bit and going, that bit, that's true. That's true. And and I'm just so I'm so glad.
It's so freeing, really, because the need not to have to be right, and to not energize those polarities is the liberation, really, because the relative field, there is no absolute truth there. It's that the description you just gave is a great example of that. It isn't that the one's right and the other's wrong. They're both, they can both be seen.
Yes, and I realized that was or the realization came that actually that is the source of all conflict.
Yeah, it is actually. Exactly.
Whether it's sisters or nations.
Yes.
It's like this. It's just amazing, amazing, and it was lovely sharing that with my sister. We have now healed that relationship. We just resting in awareness with her, just resting in as love, resting as that. And I went over to America to visit her, and with this willingness, and she also had this willingness, and we're in our 60s, for goodness sake, we've carried this all our lives, and there was just this willingness, and there was just this, we didn't need to go into what had happened, who's done what. There was just, that's all. Neither here nor there. This is real. This is real. And that's so beautiful. And it's such a, just so lovely.
It's quite easy to dismantle those situations just from the one side, but when it happens in unison like that, that's quite unusual, really. But it's much easier when it's just the investment is dropped on the two sides.
Yes, I mean, it was really, it was very beautiful. I mean, she had I could see this stuff falling away. I had no idea how the weight of it, what the weight of it was on my sister, because I was obviously the one that was right. I was the one that came up with the story. The story came to me. I was like, I sent her the story back in 2014, and she was like, what's that? And and then gradually it dawned that actually, the realization had to be real here before anything else could happen. And it was actually, it was amazing that the Buddhist teacher Tara Brach. Do you know her? Have you come across her?
Yes.
She's a psychologist teacher. So she was talking about a monk, Namoto, I think his name is, and he worked with a lot of work with depressed people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he would ask them is, if you only had a year to live, or a month to live, or 10 minutes, I think, to live, you know, how would that be? You know, where would you, what would you do with that? And I thought, well, I thought, oh, that's a very interesting question. And a year was far too long. I'm not interested. 10 minutes, I'd just go, well, okay, I'm going soon. Okay. But a month, and immediately there was this just knowing that the trip to, it was time for the trip to America. I did not want my sister to think I had died and be left in that place of where nothing was
That's
resolved.
interesting, yeah.
That was what sparked it. Yeah. So that was really useful. And of course, the timing was completely perfect because she had come to a place where, but there was willingness and wanting of it from both. But you know what I mean.
Yes. Yeah.
To use these words. Yeah. So
that was effortless being, though, the way it just came into focus like that and then just resolved.
Completely. And there were no invitations about, oh well, you know, that's a very long trip. I mean, those were the reasons before why I wasn't going, or those were the reasons given why it's a very long trip. You know, it's exhausting and blah de blah and all this stuff, and it was just like, oh, that's what's happening now. Oh, okay, let's book a ticket. Yeah. It was so beautiful because, you know, just sent her WhatsApp saying, like, you know, how about, she wanted me to visit. There'd been this invitation saying, come. And then when the WhatsApp went, the response was so welcoming. It's like, great, just drop all the nonsense, go. Nothing. And then, you know, the last time I saw her, and she was over recently in England, there was nothing there. There was nothing. There was no elephant in the room. There was nothing.
Yes.
There was no tension. There was nothing other than just
impersonal being.
Yeah. It's lovely. Yeah.
So easy.
Yeah. 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 So, well.
Well, you're so clear, and just being able to share this knowledge with, you know, people who, you know, who you see, but not feeling as though you need to find anyone, but just people will appear before you, really.
Yeah, I think so, and that it's so much clear. It's just feels, you know, having this time, being able to spend this time having this conversation. Yeah, it's difficult to say what's happened, but yeah.
But it's quite easy, even if people are absorbed in their story, explaining the way the invitations work is something that is quite tangible, so they can actually see that. So even if they're not interested in realization, that can be a door to open, really, because they can see that the invitations are being delivered, and we've been conditioned and educated into accepting them and personalizing them as though they're our own. And when it's pointed out, well, actually, they're only just being transmitted in as an invitation, and it's optional whether you exercise that invitation or not, or whether you decline it.
Yeah, I shared that with my very good friend, actually, and she thought it was great, really, really great. Yeah, that way of explaining it. Yeah. Yeah, there's a mindfulness group that
Oh yes.
sit with. Interesting. The language is very personalized, though. It's, you know, that's the thing. It's when it's the meditation is guided. It's what are the words? I can't remember the exact words, but it's notice what thoughts you're having. What, you know, it's all about you, and so it's like, yeah, it's like, well, and I'm sort of always going la 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 to end, but I like going because it's nice to be with people who at least have started to wonder about this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
And what I would say is the Neo-Advaita version is describing what's happening in the body of wisdom or in effortless being, because that's really what's happening in any moment. There are forms arising. In this moment, there's awareness of the hand on the side of the head, or there's awareness of the two voices and the forms appearing. That really is seen to be realization in terms of Neo-Advaita, because it's, you know, people would say, oh, well, there is no one, it's just arising, it's just an appearance. So that's the Neo-Advaita version. But what the Neo-Advaita version doesn't recognize is the existence of the dualistic koshas, the mental, emotional, and physical. And so when they're not understood and then it's not realized that the dualistic realm is an independent operating system, then the suffering can continue, because it's okay saying, oh, the forms are just arising. But if the forms arising are things like grief or depression or anger or fear, it's okay saying, oh, they're just forms appearing, it's just an appearance. It doesn't actually change the nature of the experience, and it doesn't explain the way we, as the sovereign infinite being, are actually empowering those experiences or fueling them with the energy through identification with the personal realm. But once we see that, then we realize that, well, as you have, that the invitations are optional. So you don't, you know, in Neo-Advaita, they say it's just happening, you know, so it's just happening that the pizza boy's turning up and you're buying the pizza. But when you realize that actually you're the sovereign being and you can exercise sovereignty in terms of whether or not to take delivery of the pizza, then that changes the nature of the experience, because it's not just saying, oh, it's the appearance of the pizza boy again.
Yeah. So the nature of the whole thing.
It's the paradox really between the absolute and the relative, because the absolute is that everything is just arising equally, impersonally, effortlessly, and neutrally. But the dualistic realm is a different system. It's a different operating system, and it's a kind of energetic system. And so because we're the infinite being, the dualistic realm is optional. So we can actually decide the degree to which we engage in that. So we can regulate the degree of investment in the personal realm effectively, which Neo-Advaita doesn't reveal that. But it's, as you've seen, that's actually what you've been doing. You've recognized, well, actually, the investment in the personal realm, for instance, in the dualistic realm, in relation to your sister, you've withdrawn that investment, and so has she. And what's left is joy, lightness, neutrality, love, peace, because the polarization isn't there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. So that's what he meant. He didn't mean that there was an experience of everything actually disappearing, of all form disappearing.
No, well, there are certain things in Neo-Advaita which can be slightly misleading when you don't know what realization is, because they say things like, well, the individual disappears. So lots of people think, oh, well, my life's been really problematic. I'd quite like it if the individual disappeared because I won't be suffering anymore. But the individual actually disappears in effortless being, because in effortless being it's only impersonal being, so there is no individual present there. You're actually just remaining as an impersonal field of awareness. So you could say that the individual has disappeared, and then the individual would re-emerge with words like I, me, or mine. So there can be just the disappearance of individuality in impersonal being, and the forms arise equally and effortlessly. But then when we re-engage the mind and we're using words like I, me, or mine, oh, I'm going over to see my sister in America, or I'm going to the shop, or I'm going to do this, we've re-engaged the personal mode. So the person seems to be appearing again.
And
But it's actually that simple.
yeah. And is there, and does that, and that is what creates the suffering,
Personalization, yes.
and without the personalization, basically there isn't any suffering.
No suffering, no.
No. And when this me, or this apparent me, this this me appears to come into being, then that the suffering comes along with it. That's the deal, basically. The suffering comes along.
Yeah, the option is there for suffering, but actually we can also utilize the dualistic realm in a selective way. So when giving the example of your relationship with your sister, so previously there was conflict and suffering. There were polarities which you were each defending. And then when that defensiveness was just relinquished, then there was no polarization. So what remains then is unity. So that's an example of the way you can still experience in the dualistic realm, but without the conflicts and without the suffering. You've actually consciously withdrawn the investment from the dualistic realm, from the polarization and the defensiveness, and what is left then is unity. So there is no conflict between you and your sister. There's a recognition of unity. So it's seeing that we don't need to, in Neo-Advaita, people sometimes think, oh, yeah, it would be great if the me disappeared. But a better option is to retain the option for personalization, but in a selective way. So what you've done with your sister is you've neutralized the polarization, so there isn't any conflict anymore, but you've retained the love, and you've retained the unity, and you've retained the enrichment in that in the relationship when there is no conflict.
Yeah.
Which is much nicer than the me disappearing. It's better that that you and your sister don't disappear.
Yeah, there's a sort of strange hollowness to that idea. There's a strange heartlessness, hollowness. There's something about that idea.
The idea of disappearing.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, that's because it's the idea of disappearing on a conceptual level, because we can't disappear, because all there is the impersonal, effortless being, which is always fully present. So when when the individual disappears, what is left is the impersonal being.
Yeah. Well, that's so beautiful. I mean, I think I mentioned in the email when I went on the ayahuasca retreat,
Yes.
and that was all there was. I mean, it sounds really creepy when you say it in words, like, oh, there was nothing, nothing, because it's like, ugh, people don't like the sound of it, but that's just the sound of it. That's not it.
No.
And then, and there, simply knowing was all that was, but knowing was that
Yes.
didn't disappear.
No.
Knowing was, so that's really interesting.
Mm.
So maybe that's what they're talking about when they say the self disappears, that nothing, all that there is then is knowing. But it's quite nice, really, being a human being, if you're not doing all the answering all the invitations.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's realizing that it is it's a whole range, really. So the subtlest one could say, well, it's beyond subtle, which is attributeless being, which is our true nature. So
yes,
like John Wheeler, he says that our true nature is beyond consciousness,
yeah,
because you could say consciousness is an alternation of the waking, the dreaming, and the sleeping states. But beyond that is attributeless being. But attributeless being, the way you describe it, is you could say it's pure knowing or pure existence. Or it's a field of infinite potential without any potential arising at that time. It's just
yeah,
infinite potential.
yes, and in terms of the koshas, is that's the why that's far away from the physical, as
Yes.
you as it
Yes.
gets. Yeah, that's really
Quite,
interesting.
sorry, Melissa. No, I was just going to say that quite a simple way to understand it is the Indian idea is that there are three aspects to our infinite nature, to attributeless being, which they call Rishi, Devata, and Chandas. So Rishi is the knower, Devata is the means of knowing, and Chandas is the known. So in attributeless awareness, you could say it's simply awareness aware of itself. So the knower is awareness, the means of knowing is awareness, and what is known is awareness.
That's it. Yeah.
And that trinity exists through all the koshas. It's all that ever exists, really. So in say the body of bliss, it's simply awareness aware of bliss.
Yeah.
In the body of wisdom or effortless being, it's awareness aware of all forms arising equally and effortlessly. So potentially all forms can arise in the body of wisdom or in effortless being. But they're known equally and effortlessly, so there's no judgment or comparison involved there.
Yes. So that's the sort of that's the human experience.
Well, it's that's the impersonal aspect, actually.
Impersonal.
Yeah, it's the because the body of bliss and the body of wisdom are impersonal fields. So it's like an infinite field of bliss or an infinite field of beingness within which all forms arise. So in this moment, if you just take because there are forms appearing, so there are sound forms, there are visual forms, physical forms. They're all appearing within the field of attributes, you could say, which is infinite impersonal being. So it's when there is the potential for manifestation, and so the forms are appearing there, but then they're still appearing neutrally and effortlessly and impersonally. So there isn't. It's only when the mind is then engaged that it becomes dualistic, because the mind could then say, "Oh, I like these flowers," or "I like that plant," or "I like the light coming through the window."
Yes. Yes. Then there's the judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah. the liking, the not liking, the wanting, the not wanting, the comparisons, all that
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I started doing this kind of, when I noticed those things going on out and about, I just go, oh, conditioned mind. That's, and then it would just
Yes.
evaporate as soon as it was,
Yes.
oh, conditioned mind, and it would just evaporate.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Good.
yeah.
Mm.
Um,
It's amazing the way we can turn off the mind and we can turn off the emotions and we can tone down the physical realm.
yeah.
But we're not told that, but it's actually quite easy.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes just there can be personal invitations which are coming in and they can be quite disturbing sometimes for one reason or another. And just by saying remain as impersonal being, then you turn it off.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't need to go there.
No.
No. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
You're so clear though, it's fantastic. And that's another aspect actually, Melissa, because um, one of the one of the aspects of the dualistic realm, it likes to maintain the idea that there's a higher authority than oneself, which keeps the dualistic realm going and the seeking realm. But when you remove that filter and you accept that everything potentially can arise within one's own consciousness,
Yeah.
you know that everything is already available for oneself. And that's a real shortcut because, well, I'm sure you've noticed already with different teachers and teachings, your inner knowing is guiding you because when you listen to anyone, you can sense whether it's coming from truth or whether there's some distortion or something there.
Yes, very, very much. I think the knowing is amazing.
Mm,
Yeah, the knowing is so trustworthy.
yes.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's really that's very powerful because it's it turns off a huge amount of seeking. Because if we're maintaining a filter which is saying, oh, there's someone outside who knows more than I do, then we keep, we just remain in that seeking mode when really you're the infinite, effortless, impersonal, timeless, omnipotent, omnipresent, indestructible being already. So you don't need to go anywhere else. It'll, whatever you need just comes to you.
yes, yes, yes.
It's so utterly simple, really, ultimately, but the complexity is only a kind of entertainment because it is so utterly simple.
Mm. The mind just loves to just have a little tinker.
Mm,
It
mm,
does.
mm.
Like, okay,
It's ingenious in the way it finds subtle little ways to try to draw us back in
yeah,
by using themes, which are familiar or dear to us.
yeah, okay. Mm. And the guidance is the way we come to be shown, this comes to be
Mm,
shown, made clear.
yes.
So
Yeah.
beautiful.
Mm. You realize it is the self revealing itself to itself
Yes, and
rather
it's so
than.
beautiful the way
Mm.
it goes on doing that
Yes.
forever.
Yes.
It's like
Yeah, definitely. Mm.
there's no kind of throwing in the towel or
No.
giving up, or it's just like
Mm.
invitation is always there.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
yeah, yeah. Mm. I love that space. That the space that we are.
Mm. Mm.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's quite interesting the way it's been for you, because there was full clarity in 2014. It's just that the invitations returned to try to draw you back into personalization.
Oh, I did a great job.
But had someone explained to you then, well, actually, all that's happening is there are these invitations to try to draw you back into personalization, you wouldn't have fallen for it then, would you? You'd been
It's been such a sort of bouncy. There've been so many times where, and then it's thinned out again, and then it's like
yes,
solidified again. And
yes,
yes, the invitations is a real, what a gift. Yeah.
good.
Yeah. 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 Amazing.